Okay. Um, yeah, so kaleidoscope coaching is going to be this embodiment of everything that I feel like I have really been like working hard toward developing. And I didn't really have, I didn't know where to set it down inside the inspired outcomes model. There just wasn't really a place for it to really grow and expand and get the attention it deserved and everything. So um, the metaphor of the kaleidoscope makes me just thrilled at the idea of like looking down this tube, that has all these different mirrors and pieces of paper, and every single little shift creates a new pattern and a new way to experience something that is essentially all the same parts inside, but it's constantly moving, right? The slightest little nuance of movement will completely change these patterns. And I feel like that is just such a perfect metaphor of what I've been doing as a coach, how I've been evolving, how I've been learning, and how I've been sharing that. And so everything that comes from me going forward will likely be under kaleidoscope coaching. And hopefully over the next couple of months, that'll be something that will be very present in your inbox and in different ways. So that's where we are. I'm going to continue to do the talks every other Tuesday. And Alan will, of course, be doing the trauma talks on the alternating Tuesdays. And my model is going to be a little bit different. I want to spend one Tuesday. So this Tuesday will be my sort of, I don't know, my little dives into different areas where I'm going to be looking specifically at the issues that are coming up with coaches. And then the other Tuesday of the month is going to be when I bring somebody in. So I'm really, 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 really interested in this marriage between the type of coaching that we do in terms of NLP practitioners and all of the different practitioners, healers, business coaches, all of the different types of people out there who have similar intention that we do, like have the same objective of supporting and helping and healing and all that kind of stuff, but have different modalities of doing it. And so I really want to open up into how other people are doing this and sort of braiding it together. So it won't be like a podcast interview so much as what it's going to be is like almost a little masterclass in working with somebody who has a different approach, and like an hour-long discussion about how the work that we do could enhance or complement and what they do and how things line up and what's different about them, and just really an exploration of how all these different modalities and stuff work together, which I think will be very, very, very interesting, if not very useful for you guys to be witness to and engaged in and involved in. So we're going to keep the same model of, I'll speak, I will attempt very, very much this year to just always keep the discussion, like the talking part of this to an hour, and then we'll maintain the Q&A after. And just remember that the Q&A is unrelated to the talk. So we'll have, if there are questions and stuff that come up regarding the topic, then of course we'll do that first. But then we'll stop the recording, and this is an opportunity for you guys to ask questions about your own coaching clients and just and not just from me, by the way, like we want to use the fact that we have so much resourcefulness with you guys, right? So, Krista may be dealing with something that Tanya has a great answer for, and I want that part of the Q&A. I'll jump in, of course, but you guys are so deep with knowledge and with, with everything that we can share together. So that's the model we'll keep. You may have noticed, I don't know, again, how many people are receiving what I put out there, but I have decided that in terms of coaches, I'm still getting, big part of my own coaching is coaching coaches. And I love it. It's a really, really, it's a part of what I want to continue to do because I feel like I'm growing in experience there, and it comes back in spades in terms of sort of this really, really fulfilling work. What has been confusing for some coaches has been, there's some people that call me 5 times a week and have no problem calling me 5 times a week. Almost every client they have, they call me and ask what they should do. And it feels a little much, right? Like it feels like it's a lot of time. I don't take things lightly. I do give things a lot of consideration and a lot of thought and a lot of expertise and stuff. So there's that extreme. And then I know that there's a whole bunch of people out there who feel like they shouldn't be calling, you know what I mean? Like they feel like it's not part of the, what they've paid for, or, whatever the case may be, or they don't feel comfortable, or whatever it is. So they're not calling, when it would really be helpful for them to just pick up the phone or text me and say, like, hey man, I've got this client I'm stuck with. Do you have any thoughts about it? Or do you have any ideas about it? And so in trying to kind of figure this out, I hesitate. I used to sort of say, like, just call anytime, anytime, anywhere, 24/7. I'll just be there for you. And, but I do have a lot of people now who took me quite literally with that. So what I've decided to do is create the Voxer thing. As some of you may have known, I was kind of playing with this last year a little bit in terms of like coaching, and I don't know, it was a disaster. It didn't work. It's not useful to be like a regular coach for me anyway, and use this Voxer tool, which is essentially like text messaging but audio. So anyone who doesn't know it, it's just like, I don't know why it's an app all on its own, but it's just like voicemail back and forth. So you can, just leave a voicemail basically, and then I'll respond. It's like having a walkie-talkie, but it's distinct. It's like a distinct app, so it wouldn't get all, tied up in your texts or whatever. But what's neat about it is that I'll get a little notice saying, so-and-so has left you a Voxer message, and it'll be somebody saying, hey, I'm, this is going on. Do you have any suggestions? And then when I get a chance, I'll hit the little button and I'll record my thoughts, often as I'm walking home, and it goes right to them. And so I've set this up as what I'm calling sort of like a mentorship option, and it would cost $25 a month, which feels like it's really, really fair. To me, it feels like nobody's going to go broke on $25 a month. It's not like a huge investment. On the other hand, it sort of makes my time feel a little bit more valued, right? So it makes me feel like if I am spending, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 50 minutes there, that I'm actually getting, it's not just, I end up being able to be much more compassionate inside that, because it's not just continually sort of like on top of everything else doing this. So it felt really, really nice to set this up. So if anybody is interested in that, the sort of two avenues, obviously, if you don't and you just have a question, still, reach out to me. But between the Tuesday talks, where we have the opportunity to have questions and answers in terms of your coaches and everything, and the Voxer option, you don't have to do it on Voxer. You could do it on WhatsApp or anything really. Those are sort of the two ways that I want to make sure that I'm really, really available to you guys. So if anyone finds value in being able to get some feedback on the work that you're doing, those are sort of the two places that I would encourage you to look at, just to see if it's, and I will never hold you to anything. If you want to, if you pay $25 for 1 month and then the next month you're not coaching a lot, or you're, don't need it, then you just don't do it again. Okay. So I am going to try and make this all really clear on the website. My website is still taracanerva.com. I'm just leaving it as that for now. I'm not going to change it over to Kaleidoscope Coaching at this point, because I don't want to, I don't want to involve another website address. But there are pages, of course, within that. And then the very last thing I want to share with you is this retreat that I have been hinting at. And I have left you hanging for a little while, because it was really, really, really difficult to get things booked. And I couldn't put it out there until I had everything booked. And that was just a very strange, difficult process. However, it is all booked. So my date has changed a little bit, and I apologize for that. I had sort of put out there as a save your date was November 17th that weekend. Instead, what it is November 30th to December 3rd. So I have a number of rooms booked. So this is going to be a really, really, really cool retreat for anyone that can choose to be there. It begins on a Thursday, and it ends on a Sunday. So it's actually 3 nights. It's in Blue Mountain, Collingwood in Ontario, which is a stunningly beautiful part of Ontario, if you've not been. I have studio apartments that you could choose to have if you want to make this a really, really, really like deeply, if you just want to get away from the world and be on your own. There are studio apartments, 1 bed, 1, mini kitchen, all that kind of stuff. I have 1 bedroom apartments that you can rent, which are one bedroom, of course, with like 2 queen beds in there, and then a full kitchen and a living space. And then there are 2 bedroom units that have, unfortunately, I'm still talking to them, but unfortunately right now it's 2 bedrooms, one with a king size bed, one with 2 queens, which makes it a little awkward because I would have preferred 2 beds in each room, but we'll see what we can do. Where 3 or 4 people could be in that. So the prices change, obviously, depending on what option you would choose there. Or you can just come if you wanted to, like if you knew someone who's going, there's pull-out sofas, or if you just wanted to actually like find your own accommodation or whatever the case may be, you can actually just join for the retreat part of this. And that's a different thing itself as well. So this is all on my website. You can go to taracanerva.com and just if you hit the resort, or the not resort, retreat, I've got the whole thing set up. Hopefully, like just an hour ago, I finished it, so hopefully it's working. But this is going to be, we are going to do, I'm running it. Catherine Davies has come in to help me run this one. And so Catherine and I will be putting this together, and I have so many cool things lined up. I've got, it's just really, really wonderful. And the balance between sort of what we do together as a group, it's going to be bringing in elements of like core transformation and talking about the integrated self and doing a lot of work there, but we're going to balance it too with, you know, time on your own. And we're going to use their beautiful, beautiful hiking trails there. And I'm developing all sorts of unique meditations for it. Anyway, it's going to be a very, 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 very cool experience if you're able to do it. So lots of that. Like I said, it just took me forever to get these booked, but I'll send it out to everyone probably tonight when we're done. And also, like I said, you can just go to the website.
So Tara, how many women or participants do you want to attract?
I would like to have about 10 or 12 is my goal. I have already booked 10 spaces. So I have 10 units or apartments or whatever booked, like 10 beds. But I have access to more. So if there is just a flood of people, if hundreds of women from all over start knocking down my door and just have to come, I do have the option for more. I don't know many more, but more. But yeah, I would really, really, really love to have 10 women. 12 would be great. I could not accommodate any more probably than about 16 or 18 at the very, very most. But if you want to put people in, I made the price for the retreat an option, which is like 800 Canadian something for just the retreat part, or maybe less. Because if you do want to bring somebody in, you know what I mean? Like if you want to bring a friend who, you know, you're happy to share a bed with or whatever, that they can actually do that really easily and just pay for the actual retreat aspect, as opposed to the accommodations, which by the way, are really, really beautiful. Anyway, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, if you have any more questions, I might as well answer them. Or you can call me, or you can book a consult with me, or you can just go online and book it, whatever you want to do. This is new, guys, because you're kind of my inner circle here too. Literally, I just finished setting up the website. I have like a whole new payment stream, like it's going into a different bank account because it's a different business. Like all this stuff is brand new. So I'm really praying that there are no hiccups with this, that I've done it all smoothly. But certainly if you run into anything tricky, if you could let me know, I would love for it to come from you guys and not the, mass public. All right. And I didn't even specify that this is for women. It kind of is, but I also realized that like I don't really necessarily need to make that distinction. The truth is, if there is a man out there who feels really like drawn to this kind of experience, obviously he'd have to get his own room, his own studio. But I don't want to exclude that. Like I don't want to exclude someone, you know, if they go through the whole thing and it really speaks to them, then I'm not going to exclusively make this a female only retreat. It's just probably going to end up that way. All right.
Tara, I just wanted to mention because I just opened it up
Yes.
and it comes in a little bit bigger font so that I cannot see on my page every like the sides of it. So you might
Oh,
just want to
okay.
check. I don't know if it's has to adjust on its own because I try to make it like a bigger screen, but unless I make it full, even if I make it, oh, yeah, well, unless I make it very big, then I cannot see everything.
Okay.
It's kind
Okay.
of
Thank you.
cuts a
Yeah.
little bit on a
I know,
side.
you know how on when you're building websites, they give you all the different sizes and you have to try it. I think I just need to probably get way more careful about that. So that will be my midnight work, guys. It'll be all fixed by
Just make
tomorrow.
it a little bit smaller font, yes. And you know
Yeah,
what?
thank you.
I will be away. I would love to come because it's it would be so lovely. I come back December 1st.
Oh no. Oh no. Well,
Yeah. So we'll
um,
see.
yeah, we'll see. You can talk to me. I mean, I will do more of these for sure. This is a big element of what I want to be doing going forward. So there will be others. Also, though, you could always talk to me about, if it was really something you could always join probably the next day. But yeah,
Are
we
you
could talk.
starting like Thursday, a full day, or
It'll be a 2 p.m. arrival. So it will not be a
okay?
full day. I mean, we'll certainly,
So Thursday would be kind of like get to know each other and just
yeah,
some.
yeah, yeah, but it will not be a full day, no. Cool. Hi, Ashley. Okay. Okay, so guys, I'm gonna launch into, I anticipated that this was going to be a little, I was gonna do some talking at the beginning, so the actual subject I wanted to speak to, I made much shorter. And the reason I chose this, so I sent out a blog that I suggested you might want to read prior to this. And the reason I did that is because this has been my summer's work. So I've been writing and writing and writing, and I'm not going to put it out until I have sort of a collection. But I do want to be introducing a lot of this material through writing first. And so you absolutely don't need to have read it. But if you did, the reason I chose this topic in particular is because I have over the summer spent a lot of time talking to coaches. So I've got lots of people. Al and I actually did some trainings in different areas over the summer. And I'm noticing some very strong patterns with coaches. And I would say that the things that are most prominent are this feeling of preparation. So coaches feeling like they're not prepared enough. So coaches feeling like they're not prepared enough to launch their marketing, that they're not prepared enough to work with the clientele that they want, that they're not prepared enough for all of these different things. And this sort of, I call it like, it's like a disease of inaction, right? We feel like we have to continue planning and planning and planning and planning in order to be prepared enough for the success that we want to create for ourselves. And I just notice it as such a dominant theme with coaches that I decided to address it. And I wanted to really look outside the box in terms of like overcoming this. And so it led me to different thinkers, so different people who have, different ideas about this sort of common wisdom that we have, right? So I titled it, We Are More Than the Sum of Our Parts. And the intention in this title was because I think that planning is the parts, right? So planning and preparedness, which our common wisdom says that you can never be too prepared, right? And I think this is very much sort of, indoctrinated in us from the very beginning. And those of you who know me well probably know that this also, meets my fancy in terms of being less prepared and less planned. My nature is to be much more spontaneous and impulsive, but I also have always felt a sense of like, I do get it that when you have the opportunity, you should be as planned and as prepared as possible. Because I also kind of assumed that that must be true because everyone says that it's true. And so I fell into that same idea of like, well, it must actually be true that the more precise you can be, this sort of like, it demonstrates that you have sweat the details, right? That you have spent the time sweating the details, that you really, really are committed to what it is that you're doing. And planning, of course, does provide this like well thought out roadmap. And I don't dismiss the importance of planning and preparation to a certain degree. So I would say that in terms of planning and preparation, there are 1,000 different examples that we could all come up with where it's essential, right? There is definitely. But I want to speak tonight about the danger that sort of lurks in planning. And indeed that like too much planning can prevent us from acting. So when it comes to coaching, I think that the two main areas, if I could, be very, very, one big brush, one area is people struggle getting clients. And one area is that once people do have clients, they struggle with feeling like they're coaching them well enough, right? So I have a lot of coaches that get clients. They don't have any problem getting the clients, but then they're sitting there with them. And if they have pace training, then this happens less. But even so, it's a sense of like, well, am I prepared enough? Am I well enough planned for what I'm going to do about this issue or that issue or whatever it is that comes up? And so I'm gonna look at both areas, both getting clients and doing as well as you can with clients. And like I said, this is just a small sort of, I'm looking at this as being something that is helpful in terms of bigger concepts. So when we have time and resources, planning can do wonders. But very often we don't realize that we are significantly lacking in time and significantly lacking in resource. And that can be, on a micro level or on a much bigger macro level, right? Sometimes we are really, truly without time and without resource. And that's when we feel like we're at a deficit without a plan, right? Without a sort of a predictable way of dealing with the situation, when of course there's all this research that tells us that the exact opposite is true. So in order to plan things, you have to make assumptions, right? So you have to basically go in and we rely on these assumptions to plan our future. So you have to, as a very good planner, you've got to go out to the future and you've got to say, well, I predict this is going to happen and this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And in order to meet the needs of these things happening, I'm going to apply X, Y, and Z. So we all know what happens when you do, when you base anything on assumptions. And there is, of course, much better guesses and worse guesses. And so there are good examples, like if you're going on a trip, the assumption that like the road on the map is still going to be there, good assumption. This is a fantastic way to plan, right? If you're going to have clients, you can assume that the clients are going to want to see your face somewhere. So you better make a plan to have an office or to have a computer or, whatever the case may be, or to follow the map or book the hotel. And this is where planning is just a no-brainer, right? It makes sense to have that. But it's a terrible way to go about things when your predictions, your assumptions are actually going to close your focus. So it's a terrible assumption to go into, say, if you were like a soccer player, and if the team went out and had one plan for executing how they were going to successfully win this game, that is not a good assumption, because you can't actually predict how everyone is going to respond in that situation. And if people are only going to be successful based on that plan, then of course they're going to miss what's actually happening. And so this is where I think a lot of coaches get stuck, because I think there is definitely everything that anybody is ever trying to sell you is based on the assumptions that they want you to make about the future that they're creating for you, right? So every great salesperson in the world knows that in order for you to buy their product or their service or their training or their way of doing things or whatever, they need to first get inside your mind, create a picture of a future based on the assumption that without this, you're not going to be good enough. You're not going to be as good. You're not going to be successful. And this is very insidious, right? This is very, very nuanced. Sometimes the greatest salespeople in the world are going to do this in a very, very effective way. And that assumption, if we, we're all NLP trained here, so we know about assumptions, right? When there are presuppositions that people put out there, we accidentally start predicting this same model of the future, which may or may not be true. And very often what it does is it like cuts our ability to be creative. It stops us from being more creative with the resources that we do have. And it moves us towards this sort of chasing model of, well, I need more of that and I need more of this, because the future that hasn't happened yet, that you're making up, isn't going to be enough. What you have isn't going to be enough for that future that you're making up. And this is really, really, really difficult to actually sit and get your head around. Planning really, really satiates and plays to our desire for control and predictability, right? So as human beings, we seek control and predictability like we look for water. It satiates something that makes us feel safe, right? But we also know here as NLP practitioners that control and predictability are rigid, right? If they break, they break, they crumble. There's a real problem. They're not very malleable when you have control and predictability. In order to actually get above that, you need to have trust, and you need to actually be responding to what is happening now, like what is really happening, not just this planned future of what you're predicting or hoping is going to happen based on your controlled predictions. And so getting to trust where you can deal with what is actually happening is a very, very difficult thing to kind of nurture, because you can't buy it, right? Like you can't find a training. Well, you can find a training, but you're hard pressed to sell something that is going to instill in you trust. And I'm not talking about like just trusting yourself, like believing in yourself. This is more like the trust that you can actually meet the present situation, and that you already have, with the resources within you, enough to be successful. And that kind of trust is really, really, really tough on people. So I just want to share a couple of things that I found. So there's a woman named Kathy Eisenhart, I don't know how to pronounce it, from Stanford. And she went around and she was just looking at organizations, and she was trying to figure out which organizations are more successful. And ultimately there was this very, 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 like only a modest relationship between the amount of planning and success. And so between what was planned and the success, the problem was, of course, that the people who were planning were actually so focused on the future and not able to take into consideration how the future was changing. But they were also getting very blindsided. They were getting very invested in their plan. You guys have all known this feeling. Every single one of us has as human beings. When you have a plan and you get really invested in the plan, and then the world changes and your plan doesn't fit anymore, but you're like, but my plan. And it's like hard to let it go, right? Like it's really, really tough to let it go. And that is your human nature. There's nobody that can hack that. When you're invested in something and you've given it, all that stuff. So disappointment is a high part of that. So when they looked at these organizations that were highly planned, they found that their success, both externally, so the results that they got, were actually less than those that were more results based, that were more rapid fire, that were more like in time and present oriented. And also that like satisfaction of the employees was much, much lower with these planned organizations. The organizations that had this sort of like rapid fire where you were really dealing with much more unplanned, what was happening was that they were actually able to come up with much more creative solutions and alternative solutions. And they weren't married to the plans in the same way. And therefore there was more flexibility. And the people working were actually much happier because they were in action. They weren't getting disappointed all the time by the lack of success that they had attached to a plan that now wasn't right. And so it's a really interesting study in terms of our psychology and our social organization and our understanding of what is successful. And to this day, you're hard pressed to try and convince somebody who has money at stake, who has, all of these different factors, to say, can we actually go with a more unplanned way of operating? It's difficult, right? You have to completely let go of control. And yet all of the evidence shows us that it would be more successful. People can actually have more ownership in the work that they do when they're more creative about it. It's the same with students. The other thing I wanted to share that I thought was really, really interesting and very valuable for our coaching guys is this research that was done by a guy named Malcolm Brenner. And he took a class at a university somewhere, and he got the students to all look at 25 of the most common words in the English language. So 25 common words. And then they went around and each person was assigned to one of the words. So they just had to say the word. So essentially you can imagine like a table, 25 words laid out, and you were, you know, in a line, and you basically had to just say out loud the word in front of you. The thing was, though, your intention was to try and memorize all the words. So after everybody had said the words out loud, they were going to then take you aside and check how many that you could actually remember. After they did this experiment, what was really, really, really evident and very strong evidence of what happens to our brains is that people were able to remember most of the words, with the exception that they couldn't remember the 3 that came just ahead of their own word and the 3 that just came after. So it's like the brain, when it's anticipating that you're going to speak, your brain stops listening. And just after we have spoken, your brain similarly shuts down and doesn't hear very much because it's reflecting on what it just said. And so it's really, really interesting to me, this idea of like, we have, when we go into a coaching.
Tara,
yes.
could you repeat that, please? You just said, because you were too quick. So the brain, what does the brain do when we say, if you can, please?
So when the brain is anticipating that you're going to speak, when it's preparing and planning to speak, it stops listening. So the 3 words prior to the one that you were going to say out loud, the brain stopped listening because it was preparing to speak. And then just after, it reflects on what it just said, and it doesn't listen in that bracket of time. But they were able to listen to all the other words. So think about this. You guys have all been in groups, like in, you know, if you're at a meeting or something where they say everyone's going to introduce themselves. And, you know, you guys probably have all had this feeling of right before, if it's going to be like in turn. So like if the person says, okay, now Sally, you're going to speak, then Lisa, then Mira. Mira is sitting there preparing what she's going to say. She is unlikely to hear Lisa as much as she hears Sally. Like when it gets to, as you get closer to your own preparing of what you're going to say, you're listening less to what the person, what is being said around you. This is true not only, and I'm extrapolating now, but this would be true not only of, you know, this type of situation, but think about when you're sitting with your client. Think about when you're sitting with your client and they're talking to you, and you're trying to come up with, what am I going to use right now? Like what tool or technique should I be using? What should I be doing in this situation? Michelle's asking, Malcolm Brenner, Brenner. And when that information is like, we stop listening to what our clients are saying. Interestingly, in you guys have probably all heard improv, when people are doing like comedic improv, and you know that it's very famous. People will say yes and. So this was actually developed by a woman in 1939 who was working somewhere with children who were in like impoverished sort of areas, really difficult areas for school. And what she developed was this ability to recognize that if somebody is speaking and you're waiting to respond, that whole shut off happens. Whereas if you say, if somebody is speaking and what you need to do is respond with yes and, it requires you to continue to pay attention to what the other person is saying so that you can continue. And so people often remark on how brilliant comedians are, right? We watch these improvisational comedians and we're all sort of like, holy shit, they're like, they're so good. How do they come up with these brilliant things? And what they know is that the brilliance of what they do is not in what they say, it's in their listening. They have to be just on point to listen to what's going on, to the point where when they speak, the only thing they know they're going to say is yes, and then the rest just comes. They're as surprised as everybody else with what comes out, right? This is that trust. This is that, like, if you have done the work of knowing, how to express yourself and how to perform and, all the stuff that practice does, which is essential, just like we should as coaches, right? You need to know what you're doing. You've got to put the work in to have a grasp on like what your resources is. You want to have good resources. But essentially where your brilliance is going to come from, where your genius is going to come from, is in how well you can listen to what's going on. And then if you answered your clients with yes, and the degree to which that would keep you more open to the experience, and then trusting the resources you have. So one of the things that I think is evidence, obviously, I'm sort of beating a dead horse a little bit here, but planning keeps us focused on what we need that we currently don't have, right? So any good planner, part of their skills is going to be kind of like assess what you've got, notice what you need that you don't have, gather that along with what you already have, and create something that is going to match the predicted future, right? And of course, that's done fantastic. Again, just to keep reducing this to its simplest form, that is a fantastic skill if you're making a shopping list, right? If I'm going to the grocery store, it is very useful for me to like look in my kitchen, notice what I don't have, and then write it down on the list so that I can effectively plan my shopping list and I come home with the right stuff, right? Makes sense. It's not a good way to search for, say, happiness, right? You are not in a good frame of mind if what you're doing is you're consistently trying to assess what you don't have, which if you were to gather and find and have, will allow you to be happy. That's your recipe for suffering. That is your recipe for never feeling like you're a good enough coach. If you are continually looking around and saying, okay, what do other coaches have that I don't have? What is it that successful coaches do that I don't do? What is it that other people have out there that I can effectively plan to get so that I can be even better at what I'm doing? It's not a good way to approach your own happiness or your own success, right? What it also does is it limits us to using the resources that we have exactly as they were meant to be used for, right? So, we watch our kids, we all, we can use kids as such beautiful examples of this, but like, adults, we condition ourselves into believing that like the toilet paper roll is just a toilet paper roll. Kids, of course, with their creativity wide open and much less planned than we are and prepared than we are and all that kind of stuff, they see a toilet paper roll and it can be one of 100 things, right? And again, we have model after model after model of people demonstrating that creativity is so much more effective when your resources are limited. We like watching shows like those cooking shows where they say, okay, here are the ingredients you have, make something brilliant and genius from these. And that is so much more interesting to watch than saying, okay, you have all the money in the world and every ingredient in the world, now make something, right? Like, how much more genius do you get out of like, here's 10 ingredients, make something beautiful. Now we see people sparkle and shine, right? Like now, not that you don't the other way, but it's different. It's a different type of creativity. When you have to look at an apple and say, okay, I have limited, thoughts about apples in the past, but now this is all I have to, wow the world with it. What can I do? And all of a sudden your brain just opens up, And I think as a coach, this is one of the things that we really often forget about. We forget that, like, what if, I get coaches who will call me and say, I'm stuck with this client, and I'll say to them, okay, now have you checked the IRs, the internal representation of that problem? And they go, what? Well, I did, like, this thing and this thing from the advanced course and this thing from Master Prac. And okay, but did you check the IRs? Did you check the internal representations? 101 of NLP, right? The very, very, very first thing we teach you in NLP. What is the internal representation inside their head that is causing them to believe this thing is a problem? But people have so many resources right now that so often, I cannot tell you how often, the coaches that I'm working with aren't even using IRs anymore. They're not even, because they're so basic, right? Like they're using all these other things. But the truth is that I still find that probably some of the most powerful change that I have with my clients is just going into, like, close your eyes, and when you see inside your mind the school that you're so scared of, is it black and white or is it color? Is it bright or is it dim? Right? Like, that's where the problem is. And imagine, as a coach, if that was your only tool. Could you create effective change? You wouldn't have access to, like, some of the most beautiful, eloquent stuff that we do. However, I bet you could still get 50% of your results, right? But I bet you don't use it for 50% of your results because you're looking for so much more, right? You're looking for so many more things. So I think that one of the coolest stories around this is, and this is in the book Stretch, Scott Sonnenschein. There was a man that you guys know who was given the challenge of writing a book using only 50 words, 50 words, write a book. And the thinking behind it was, you're going to be so limited. And instead, anyone know who this is? Tanya does, of course. Oh, you don't? I thought you popped in there because you knew. It makes sense to me. Dr. Seuss. And you know what he wrote? Green eggs and ham. So he was given 50 words. They're actually listed in the book. I'm sure you can just Google it. The 50 words that he used to write green eggs and ham. And he used each of these words. And what he says about being limited to these 50 words was that it did not feel like restriction. It didn't feel at all like limitation. He felt this massive freedom because he just knew, like, these are the 50 words I have to use. And inside of that, the freedom that he experienced and came up with, of course, now is just one of the most classic books in the whole world. And I think that there is so much to learn. Like, there is so much to, that goes so far beyond the idea of, like, less is more, And as a coach, what I feel like is really, really important is this idea of, like, we need to stretch ourselves more with the resources that we have. And we will really find those genius areas inside of us. If you can combine this idea of, like, listening instead of preparing and planning, really paying attention to what is actually happening. And again, I have to emphasize, this doesn't mean you don't do the work. This is by no stretch am I in any way, shape, or form saying, like, you don't need to train at all. You can just, like, whatever, like, just go in and do whatever. Like, you still need to be practiced with your skill. You still need to know that you can effectively execute. You need some evidence that things work or don't work and all of that kind of stuff. But you're going to do it so much more in action than in planning mode. And in terms of our marketing and all of the things that we feel like, we're getting sold so much around the planning and the preparedness of it. And I don't know them all, but I'm sure I could get somebody who would talk to you about the most successful marketing out there is probably far less planned than the successful marketing that is actually following some sort of, we talk about this sort of formula stuff that's out there. And I think that if we could bring this all together, it makes us so much more than the sum of our parts. right? These are the things that you can have, A, B, C, and D. But those parts themselves, those are not the things that are going to make you successful or not successful. It's what you can do, how creative you can be with those resources. I promise you that there are coaches out there who have half of the training that you do in terms of, or that, I'm not speaking specifically to you universally. There are people that have much less, who are able to be so much more creative with the resources they have, because they don't have another $3,000 for another training, or they don't have access to this, or that, or whatever it is. And so they're doing the very, very best. They're getting more creative with what they have. And I, as a mentor to a lot of coaches, that's often what I'm sharing with people is, rather than, I've got this solution that you can go chase out here, the answer so often is, well, have you tried this thing again, a different way? Have you thought about using this in this situation? So no, I am going to leave it right there. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to tell you one more story. One more. Because look at it, it's only 8:24. Oh, good. Yeah. Yes, trial and error and play versus trying to plan everything. There is this concept of, we often give the credit to the plan, when in fact it's the action that we take that actually leads us to success. So there's this beautiful story that is a true story of this Hungarian, army or something, and a bunch of soldiers get dropped somewhere, and then they get lost, and the captain or whoever's in charge believes that they're lost. There's no way that they're going to find their way back to the troops, and they don't know where they are and all this stuff. And after a couple of days of sort of giving up on them, all of a sudden this group of soldiers comes marching back into the camp. And the captain looks at them and says, how in the world, like, how did you make it back here? And they say, well, this one guy here, Jim, found a map. And so we actually had a map, and we were able to follow the map back. And so the captain asked to look at the map, and the map was for a completely different set of mountains. The map was not for that set of mountains. And when they talked to this group of soldiers, what they discovered was that it wasn't actually the map, of course, because it wasn't the right map. But what the map did is it gave them a plan. It gave them a reason to not panic. It gave them the hope and the belief and the certainty that they were going to follow the map and make it back. It allowed them then to become very present to where they actually were and where they were headed. So it actually put them into action. It caused them. So when the map didn't match the surrounding, but they thought that it should, they would just say, well, I guess this is actually represented a little differently than it actually is, but we're still heading. And they were so present in their situation that they gave the credit to this map, to the planning. But the solution was actually in the fact that they were just taking action, being present, noticing what was available, and being creative with the resources that they had. And that is a cool sort of story. So I leave you with that. Are there questions? Are there comments? Michelle, I would love to hear your expand on what you just said there.
Yeah, so this is something I've had a couple conversations with clients and other coaches and therapists lately about getting stuck in the needing more knowledge, which is great. And we all continue to learn, but continuing to learn and continuing to gather all of that before we step into any action.
Mm-hmm.
And getting stuck in that, and how that's often fear-based and goes back to, some of those deeper core beliefs of inadequacy, or, our insecurities, or whatever that looks like, and working with people there instead of this surface level that you see so often, especially in social media and online coaches, of you need this and you need this and do more of this. And it's really, like you were saying, like getting back to the core and the basics. And just even the idea of trial and error, looking at marketing. Well, someone can tell you something worked perfectly for them, but have you done it? Like, it might not work well for you. And so the importance of, well, try something and then get that feedback and then go from there, and allowing yourself to do that versus thinking that somebody else can always give you the perfect answer and the perfect solution. And they can give you guidance and it might work, but still allowing yourself to try those different things and those trial and error in that space of play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And putting the responsibility of the success on the plan, right? Like loading it so that if it doesn't work and you don't have success, you go back to the plan. It's much like our focus drives behavior creates results, right? It's like people are basing their results on the plan and the preparedness of something, and they're bypassing that crucial piece, which is like, no, it's your creativity, it's your execution, it's your action, not likely to be so much the plan and the preparedness. And that is again a very, very difficult thing, because we're taught from the beginning that planning and preparing is how we're going to be most successful. It also brings to mind what you're saying, Michelle, like that again, my own experience has been that I have really, really felt a lot of incongruency with the typical way of selling things. And I think it's because it's such a move away from framework, right? Where a lot of sales is focused on like fear and the pain, right? The pain of not having the thing. Where I have recognized with this that I think like I'm going to sell retreats. I'm still going to sell workshops to you guys. I'm still going to like share things with you. But my new sort of awakening with all of this, my new awareness is like, I am only selling towards things. So like, I want you to come on this retreat if you think that it is going to like spark joy in you, and it's going to create like even more insight and awareness, if you're going to have fun, if you're going to be like experiencing something that you really want to experience, like if it creates fullness, if it does, like if that's what you're seeking, then I want you to come, because I'm creating that for you in a way where it can be enhanced. But I don't want to be selling this in a way where it's like, are you overwhelmed with your life? Are you broken and empty and you need this to like rejuvenate and get back? Like, that is subscribing to something that I don't want to be contributing to anymore. And I think that probably the people that are offering the most creative alternative ways of like, I'm going to continue to learn 1,000 things. I'm going to pay for 1,000 more, workshops and like different things that I'm certainly going to learn and go to. But the awareness of like, I'm not going to this because I am lacking if I don't have it. I'm going to this because I am really, really excited about adding this to what I already have in a really creative way. Right. I think that is just, I wish that we could collectively create more of that and less of that other sort of chasing, you need more, you don't have enough.
I see too that a lot of times people sign up for a certain training or a workshop, and it said, oh, do this in the workshop. Maybe it's something for marketing or something like that for their business. And then it doesn't work for them.
Yes.
And then it's well, they told me to do it, and the accountability just goes right out the window. And so I've seen some people that I've worked with, they get stuck in that pattern as well, where they keep doing the things because then they have the thing to blame when it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. And there are ways, like I said, like you can't buy creativity. You can't, but you can act like actors will go. Like one of the workshops I would love to start sort of like curating would be an experience for coaches where we could actually use like the yes and model, where we're not learning specific techniques. Like I'm not teaching you a new thing, where I'm not, somebody else isn't teaching you a new tool, a new skill or whatever. But what we're doing is we're actually learning how to enhance our own ability to trust that with the resources we have, we can respond even more effectively to the situations that we're in, right? So that we could really be like, I mean, you can learn that. That is definitely something worthwhile, is to go into like a guided experience where you could stretch, where you could really learn and practice and get more comfortable and more familiar with stretching, as opposed to like adding on, because it's a little bit of a safety net with that. Like, I don't have to change. I don't have to get like braver. I don't have to get more creative. I just need to learn this and add it to my, whatever. And then I'll be a better coach. But the truth is I've been doing this for long enough now and really putting the puzzle pieces together of like, I have occasionally said to Alan, I find it frustrating that you can't you can teach everybody whatever, but you can't make somebody wiser than they are. You can't make somebody more mature than they are. You can't make somebody more creative than they are, like that sort of thing. But I actually think I'm wrong. I think that you got to stop teaching them skills though, at some point. Not that, again, you need to learn whatever skills you want to learn to bulk up to the point where like you're satisfied. But then all the work, and where I'd like to really, really be working and working with my coaches is on stretching, right? Rather than adding. And that is a brand new sort of area to explore. And I'm so thrilled that there's so much research behind it, right? I think there's so much compelling. And what it does is, in a world where there is just too much shit, it whittles it down, right? The message is like, you have enough instead of you need more, which is just, I think, at every level, so needed right now.
I want to add, Tara, that someone once told that there was this coach, and we as coaches, because we are already in the coaching path, and I'm telling myself too, like, we already are good coaches and we have everything it's required, to be with someone. But one coach said that he was on a stage and he was asking someone from the audience, okay, I'll show, demonstrate the skills and help you, who has a problem. And so the guy comes and he talks about the problem, and the coach is just say like, oh, okay. And the guy talks and talks. And the guy actually who came with the problem, he solved his problem, where the coach, all he said is, oh, okay, yes, oh, sure, okay. And at the end, this one woman, like when he was talking about feedback, she's like, so what coaching did you do there? And everyone was like, okay, like all he was saying is like, oh, yes. And this guy solved his own problem.
Yes.
And this coach said, because I was just present there. That's all he needed, me being present there, so that he can start opening up and saying, and solutions were just coming to him. So
it's so neat, Mira, and I so appreciate your story, because that yes and. So this woman that developed the yes and then of course, what do they call it? Like all those different Second City and all those places. When those comedians talk about it, they not only are they surprised by what they say, they don't know when they're going to interrupt with the yes and, right? They don't know until it suddenly hits them. So they'll listen and listen and listen. All of a sudden there'll seem like a spot that's perfect to come in and say, yes, and they don't know when that's going to happen until it happens, right? Because usually the person talking is under the instruction to, you just keep going until the next person says yes, and then they keep going, and then you keep going until the next, right? So they don't know when they're going to jump in. And so as a coach, we know this to be true. Sometimes I say almost nothing. Like sometimes, because when it's an unfurling, when it's like an opening. What you just described is like, I know exactly when my client has just actually started to like, by me being present, they're just finally expressing and noticing, and they're realizing and hearing themselves and all that kind of stuff. And I need to almost do nothing. In contrast to when I have a client who sits down, and when I'm listening, I know that what's happening is they're looping and looping and looping, and they're going down their own little rabbit hole of the story that they want to tell themselves, which is getting them in trouble. I know then I need to interrupt. Do you know what I mean? Like for that person, it's very important that I don't just like let them, because it is a model of sort of talk therapy to just kind of listen. But in that, you want to, if you're really listening, you will tell the difference. You'll be able to know the difference between like, you just need to sit back right now, or wow, do we ever need to stop this cart from going down the hill because it's on a crash course, right? and you're going to jump in with your like, yes, and actually, right, and guide them back to safety, right? So that is
so
such
true.
a beautiful example.
So true. That's true. Like we've got to recognize this when the person is ready, you know, unfolding and seeking for their solution, so they are progressing with that, or they are just like, yeah, as you said, like go around.
Yeah.
And I also just wanted to add that just my example that because I'm Toastmasters and I like to speak.
Yes.
And I'm like, I say, ask myself, like, why am I still with Toastmasters? You know, like it's been years, and I love coaching, but I don't coach yet one-on-one. You know,
I'm glad you
you don't know. I coach, but maybe not one-on-one, and not I don't have yet paid clients. But this one little thing that changed, as you talk about the creativity that we all have, but we just don't believe we do because we look at others and we compare. And I was like, and I know when I sometimes look at posts and I'm like, oh my God, these people are so smart. They're so good. They like, yeah, no, I'm still here. Like they're already there, right? That's usual response. But then when I was preparing for this for the speech, and then in the past, like a couple years ago, and I blame maybe menopause, because for the last year, like I've seen so many changes in me and I forget things, and I'm like, I don't have that excitement anymore. I'm like, oh my God, what these women have to go through. And it's like, how we are like new things. As soon as you think like, oh, I have freedom, now you have to deal with something else. But there was this little switch. In the past, I would like to create some speeches, some talks. I would get excited. Like I learned something, for example, about NLP, and it's like, oh, I have to share, I have to tell other people. But now I'm like, yeah, who cares? Maybe they don't need it. You know, like in that plateau, things that I don't really like, but that's where I am.
Yeah.
But that's one little thing changed when this guy said, you don't need to write a speech anymore. And I maybe knew it, but it hit me.
Yeah.
Just have collected inventory of your stories. And all you need to do then, you first step, inventory stories. You just like, and I'm like, oh, how will I find now stories? Like it's impossible. You forget things. But he gave us 10 minutes. He said, like, just name of the story. And I started to 1, 2, 3, think, oh, this and this pops up, because there is no indifferent story. Like each story has some point. Then we have to kind of write the point. But what it did for me actually open up that I was, before I would put my creating a story, writing, let's say for Toastmasters, to the last minute.
Yes.
And I blame myself. I'm like, oh, criticize. I'm so hard. Like, Mira, you're doing it again and again. And you know you have to prepare. You know you have got to plan it and do this and rehearse and blah, blah, blah. But then he said, do this, just stories, and just have a map, as you mentioned, like the map, and each point, like what points you want, and a story.
Yeah.
You know what? I felt the relief.
Yeah.
I did it again. I started to do my speech at 10 a.m. and I had my Toastmaster at 12 at noon. I'm like, Mira, you do it again. But then I was like, but I'll do it. You know what? I'll be me, spontaneous, no preparation. I don't have to be perfect, and it will be a good fit. And it did go well. The only problem is I went overtime. Instead of 7 minutes, 9 minutes. And that's my problem.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what, not a big deal, but I felt inspired a little bit more and open. And I'm like, oh, actually, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Where, you know, you would have to drag yourself and plan on this. So I really love that you talk about that. It's like, listen to me. And it's like, Mira, just be yourself. Don't worry. You got like, and you forget the story, like something will pop up if we trust ourselves, right?
Yeah. That's right. And even when it's you know, if you go over, or if you realize it didn't work or whatever, you're still experiencing something that is infinitely more valuable than if you didn't. Yeah. I think that whole planning and preparation up on a pedestal is something that we have kind of, you know, it really, really worked for a productive society of sort of times past, but it is something that we need to have more discerning ability of when it's going to be useful and when it's not, and when to free ourselves of it. I love that. Thank you. Guys, it's 8:42. I want to stop the recording. So that you can stop the recording.